Hi everybody, how you doing? I am Johan. That is Charleston. Today on Better with Age, we have the one, the only, one of the unbelievably durable, I guess you could say, one of the most remarkable coaches, GMs,
Resilient.
resilient, yes, resilient. One of the CFL. When you talk CFL, you gotta love this man, Mr. Jim Barker. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
You've been,
Thanks.
I've been looking at your stats. Charles and I were looking at your stats, and we came up with some fantastic numbers. But you've been coaching. Is this true? Since you were like 10 or 11, you were kind of looking to do that?
Actually, yeah, I started coaching basketball back when I was 14. I coached a 12 team of, actually, it's a great story. There was grades 10 or ages 10 to 12. And I drafted all 11-year-olds. My first years, I was 14 years old. I drafted all 11-year-olds, they were all dads that were the coaches. So the first year we went about 500, and the second year we kicked everybody's ass and went undefeated.
Holy crap. Talking about knowing your profession from the get-go. Holy shit. So
what made you do something like this? Like usually the kid wants to be in the sport, but you wanted to be the one leading the way and coaching the sport. Yeah, controlling.
Yeah, I don't know. It was something I was doing because I had blown my knee out playing basketball and had knee surgery, so I couldn't play basketball I was on the team, and then I got hurt. So they asked me if I wanted to coach, so I started coaching, and I just I played football throughout high school, and then once I was able to go to college, I got offered a chance to coach, and I said, you know what, that's what I want to do. I had never coached football till then, but I started with Pop Warner. I started coaching, again, they were 12 and 13-year-old kids. When I graduated from high school, I went to USC. Actually, I didn't go my first year out of high school. I had to go to junior college, but I went to junior college and then worked my way. But I started coaching, and that's what I love doing. And our Pop Warner team we won a national championship. We played 1 year in Louisiana, a team from LA. We played another year in Hawaii. But I was fortunate to have been around some really great coaches at a young age. And they developed a love for it. So when I graduated from college, I went to USC. Clay Matthews was my college roommate. We were best friends since about grade 8. He's gone on now. His son is still playing with the Rams, but Clay played 21 years in the NFL.
Yeah.
And so he was playing at SC. I was coaching 2 teams. I was coaching a high school team and a Pop Warner team, that same Pop Warner team at night. So I just kind of inundated myself. When I graduated, I walked in at Occidental College and said, I'll do anything. I don't care about I just want the experience. And 6 months later, the head coach left, and they asked me to be the interim head coach and I was 21 years old, just out of college. So I did that. They hired a new coach who promised me it was kind of my introduction into football, because into making a living doing this, because the guy who interviewed, I got to be on the interviews. Here I'm a 20, 21, 22-year-old kid. And we picked this guy as our coach. And in the interview, he says, oh yeah, you're going to be my only full-time assistant. And I'm going to rely on you. The guy was coming from Chicago. As soon as he got the job, he brought his own guy with him and said, I still want you here, but you're just going to, and I said, you lied to me. And so I took off. I went to San Francisco State, where I got a chance to work with Mike Holmgren. My second year, I became the offensive coordinator. We hired Mike as our quarterback coach in my third year at San Francisco State. And then Mike and I left, and Andy Reid came in with Dirk Cutter to replace us. Dirk, he's the offensive coordinator in Atlanta. At least he's kind of been going around. But so a lot of great coaches came through San Francisco State. And so, yeah, it was kind of from there. And then I spent 20 years down here in the US and got an opportunity to go to Canada and fell in love with it. and I've been there ever since. Pretty much. I came down for the XFL when, again, I mean, I'm just rambling on here. I know you guys have.
That's great, though. We want to
This
hear
is stuff I didn't even know. Like we were looking at your coaching bio, and I was like, man, Jim Barker been coaching since the 70s, the late 70s. Like, how the hell is this even possible? I don't even think you're old enough to be coaching that long. And so you start putting two and two together. Like, man, he got a nice rap sheet.
Yeah.
Well,
the story I was going to tell is the only time I left the CFL from the time I got there was in 1999. I got named. I was the youngest head coach in the CFL in Toronto. And actually that year, 1999, Don Matthews had just left and gone to Edmonton. I knew they were selling the team. We were owned by Interbrew, and I knew they were selling the team. I got a 2-year contract, but really they were going to sell the team after the first year. And I understood that. But it was such a great opportunity. Mike Holmgren talked to me about coming with him at that point to Green Bay when he moved Andy to quarterbacks. And anyway, I had just taken the job here and I couldn't do it because I didn't think it was the right thing to do to leave right after being named the head coach in Toronto. So after my first year there, again, I know the team is up for sale. I hate to say, I mean, I never got fired. I went home for Christmas. I got back and I went into the office. We were in the trailers out at University of Mississauga. And I went into the office and my key didn't work. And I said, oh, I wonder what that means. So I called the league office and they said, oh yeah, the team was sold and your contract was not a part of the deal. So we're going to be paying you your second year, but you're no longer employed there. I said, well, kind of get in and get my stuff. So nobody ever fired me. I went and my key didn't work in the door. So
did you get your stuff back?
I've had some great experiences in this league.
Yeah. Did you get your stuff back at least?
I did. I did.
Cow, that's
only to go back in 2012, we were still in the same places and it burned up and all my stuff burned up because I stored it there for the winter in the office and they had a fire. It's amazing how things go around.
Yeah, you think those are some unbelievable names when you talk about, Andy Reid, Mike Holmgren, talking about that. But tell us the story of how you, and because this is a good one, I know you and Mr. Hughes started to get to know each other and how that relationship started, because I know that Charleston and I were talking last night and he was going, yeah, I got cut and I got sent home and then he brought me back and I had to prove it. Well, he's been proving it ever since, but I'll let you tell.
Well, it was Charleston. Was it 2008 or 2007?
2008.
Okay, so it was 2008, and I had been there since 2005 as I had been the head coach in 2003, and then the Bucks guy, Michael Federick, basically fired me because I cut his kid. That's another great story. I cut his kid at the end of the year and then he fired me. He waited till 2 days before Christmas. My mother was flying in to see me and she left LA. I had a job. And by the time she landed, I was fired. It was a classic. Anyway, but I stayed in Canada for a couple reasons, but stayed up in Canada in 2004, became the GM in 2005. So I was the GM up until in 2000, and the team was bad back then. In 2004, I don't know if you remember, there was like 4,000 people. Well, John Frazani and Ted Hellard and a group of Calgary people bought the team. And I was doing a radio show, and I started a football school in town because I was an American. I could only stay there if I did something in football, and I didn't want to leave Canada. So I stayed there, and I'll never forget it. It was in January. John Frazani comes up to me with a wad of bills, like just a big round wad of bills. He says, listen, I had never been a GM. I mean, it's funny because people now forget that I used to coach. They forget that, I was I had won back-to-back championships as an offensive coordinator in Montreal with Anthony Calvillo, his first MVP. I was the offensive coordinator, but people forget that stuff.
Yeah.
So now here I am in 2005, and John Fresani says, "Can you be the GM?" And I said, "Sure, I can do." I'd never done it. I was the only person that the organization had at that point. John gives me a wad of bills and says, "Well, just go to the U.S. and find us some players. We're going to hire Tom Higgins as our head coach. You're going to be the GM, and we're going to build it from here." And so that's what we did. And I went on down to the U.S., found players, and started the recruiting process. In 2007, I hired John Murphy as like he was a guy who went around, and I had met him at some of the games. I didn't know personnel people. I was a coach.
Yeah.
And when you sit at a table with coaches, they speak one way. And then when you sit at a table with personnel people, they have a completely different vernacular. So I needed to learn that. And so John Murphy he was like a media guy. He wasn't even in football. I hired him as kind of and he had brought Charleston's name up to us in 2008, where Huff came in. He wanted to be the head coach and GM, which again, the biggest thing for us was get Huff. So I moved up to being a senior vice president, and Huff had the title of head coach and GM. So I was doing the same things, and I helped Huff with putting his staff together. We brought Chris Jones in, and Charleston was one of the players that we felt fit what Chris Jones does. Now, Charleston, correct me if I'm wrong, because it was a while ago. You were an inside linebacker, correct? In college.
I started off as an inside linebacker in college.
At Northwood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look at that.
But you weren't an edge pass rusher, correct?
Never did it in my life.
Correct. And we brought you in, and we were going to make you an edge pass rusher. We only have 2 weeks of training camp. So at the end of it, and I've been trying to figure this out. Who did we keep over you? Who was the starter that got hurt? Do you remember?
Fontaine Hunter, Juwan Simpson.
Well, Juwan was inside though.
Yeah, Juwan was inside. It was Fontaine Hunter and Marcus Rowell. LaMarcus Rowell. And okay, so we kept both of those guys. And I think it was Fontaine Hunter. Was he a Canadian? He might have been a Canadian though, Fontaine. I don't remember. Anyway, one of those guys get hurt the first week. We called Charleston. We didn't want to send him home, but that's the way the CFL works. And if I know Charleston will remember, I told Charleston, stay in shape, because the way this league works, you are there, because back in those days, we only had 5 guys on the practice roster.
Really?
And I said, we send you home. You are our practice roster guy. If we get a guy hurt, you're coming back and going to be and going to get a chance to play, and you're going to get a game. And if you don't play great, you're going to be back home. Well, needless to say, that was in 2008. He played it was game 2 or 3, and he hasn't been off the field in the CFL since, and here we are. And that to me is one of the most amazing stories ever in the CFL.
Yeah. So Charleston, how did you feel about that? I want to get your side of the story, your perspective on that, how you get cut. What is your emotions? I don't know, Jim, if you know, but
I mean, I guess it's one thing. It's one thing getting cut, especially because I had already been cut from teams before, like the Lions, and I've been cut from other teams. So I knew the feeling of getting cut, but it was just a feeling of, all right, it's like the third time I've been cut for a team. And I'm like, man, maybe it just ain't cut out. Plus, financially, you can't keep chasing a dream that just ain't there, because the bills keep coming. But the tryouts keep coming, but the bills don't stop either. So it's like, man, I can't afford to keep going to these places and trying out for team and not bringing in no cash. So like when I went to Calgary, and ended up playing, I felt like I should have made the team. And then when the bad part is when all your teammates start saying, man, you shouldn't be going home. Like, you should be here. And you start hearing it from other players on the team. And like, I think Randy Chevrier, he was one of the guys who was like, man, I don't know what they're doing, but I'm gonna go up there and I'm gonna speak to him. I'm gonna have a voice for you up top and go talk to him. I don't know if he ever did, but he was like, yeah, I'm gonna go up there and tell them that they're making a mistake by sending you home. But at that point, you sit up there and have talks with coaches and the staff, and they say, hey, just be ready. At that point, I was completely writing football off. So I was thinking like, okay, now I got to go home, get a job, figure out life after football, figure out what I actually want to do now. And yeah, man, 3 weeks later, I got that phone call and was like, yeah, I want to come back.
I'm back in. Yeah. And 100.
It's funny, Charleston. I'll tell you that I remember now that you mentioned the names Fontaine Hunter and LaMarcus Rowell, you got 2 weeks to make a decision. Both of those guys were 6'2" or 6'3", and you were, what are you, 6 foot?
Yeah, 6 foot.
Yeah, 6 foot. You had a lot of explosiveness, but you had never played on the edge. And you just make a decision based on things that maybe aren't true. That if you'd had a month of training camp, it's one of the problems that we had back, especially back in those days with the small practice rosters. We couldn't keep a guy like Charleston around because you only had 5 spots, and you always keep receivers because learning the offense is hard, and you maybe keep a quarterback. And so you think offense first because defense is based on reactions and things. But we knew Charleston was a player. There was never a question about that. We knew he was playing a new position. Yeah. But it does speak to, if a guy's 6'2" or 6'3", he's got a better chance just because, well, okay, we're taking a guy who's got physical size and things like that. You can't measure a player's heart. You can't measure those kinds of things in a 2-week period. And Charleston Hughes is still playing in the CFL because he's got as big a heart as any man that's ever stepped on the field in the CFL. Yeah. That is an absolute fact. Because physically, at this point, how old are you now? 40, 50?
Turned 37 in 6 days.
37 in 6 days, and you're still playing like you're in your early 20s. And that's because of your heart. That's because of the things that make you Charleston Hughes. And again, we lose a lot of players like that because of a short training camp and those kinds of things. So my hats are off to you. And like I say, there's no player in the CFL I have more respect for than Charleston because of us going back in history. And in that year, we won the Grey Cup in 2008. And he was a big part of that. And it was great.
I'll follow up with 2 questions then for you, Jim. With that, one, is there a guy that you cut that you can tell us a story that he went absolutely berserk? Or when you think about all the years and you had to cut someone, what's the most bizarre reaction that you ever got from someone?
Actually, it was again another guy that I just love. I drafted him first overall in Calgary, Miguel Robide. Yep. And I brought Miguel to Toronto in 2011, and I just felt he was a player who was playing in coaches have different things, and I just felt like he hadn't reached his potential. But had all the physics. He's 6'5", and he's a mean Frenchman, and he was just I just really, and I just liked him as a guy.
He was surrounded around some ball players at the University of Miami too.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
He was surrounded around Ray Lewis, Jason Taylor. Like Miami in their prime days when their defense was unbelievably good. Ed Reed. Who else did they have on that It was a bunch of players on that defense.
Everything about Miguel spelled he was going to be a great player because he wasn't quite an NFL guy, but he was perfect as a Canadian in our league. So I brought him in 2011, and for whatever reason, we had to cut him, and he was shocked by it. He was crushed. He didn't know what to do. And, he walked out of my office and we were both in tears. And I haven't heard from him since, and I hope he's doing great. That was the hardest. I mean, I've cut hundreds of players. I mean, that's just part of what you have to do, and none of them are easy. There isn't one of them well, no, I shouldn't say that. There were a couple where I was happy to do it because they were just dinks. And I'm telling you, when you get to cut a dink, there's something that's great about that. But 95% of them, they hurt. It hurts to cut them. But that one will stick with me forever.
Really?
Because I'm not sure Miguel knew what he was going to do or where he was going to go. And again, I haven't heard from him since. He walked out of my office, and I walked to the door as he went, and I watched him walk to his car, and he was almost dumbfounded, and it was awful. It was awful. So that is the most memorable cut of all the cuts I've ever made, was Miguel Robade. But it was one of those things. If I brought him in as a first overall pick, and I guess I took him out, and that's too bad. But I was shocked nobody ever picked him up, or maybe he chose not to go. I don't know, but that's the one that sticks out to me.
So with that, then too, also I want to know, is there some guys who are the guys that stick out in your mind about the most talented, or the guys that you
that's
talk
an
about
easy.
You talk about the dinks and do that, but let's talk about the guys that you love to coach, or the guys that you like, maybe 3 or 4 guys that you go, man, that was awesome to coach.
Well, there was, I mean, it goes back to, I mean, every year, you know, here's the great thing about the CFL, and I've had chances to leave. I turned down a coordinator job at a Division I school back when I was early in the league that would have doubled my salary. But the thing about the CFL is you deal with great guys, and people who are CFL fans know the players in the CFL are special, and they're guys who you want to be your sons. So there aren't many that I haven't really loved being around. The greatest player, without a question, was Doug Flutie. I mean, he taught me so much about offensive football in this league. Now, I was fortunate to have been with Don Matthews for both of his last 2 Grey Cups. I was his offensive coordinator. And in 97, when Doug was our quarterback, it's one of the top offenses in history. And, you know, he was a guy who would say, okay, if our right guard is going to get his butt kicked by the guy, if I know that, and that guy makes a sack, it's on me. That was his mentality. He just made everybody around him better. And he would say, don't worry. Don't even give that linebacker to anybody. If he comes and makes a tackle on me, then I'll be ready to retire. That was his mentality. He was just, I mean, a great story. It was 1997. I was new there. We're getting ready to start training camp, and I get in, 5:30 or 6 in the morning. I'll go in, and somebody is in there, and it's Doug, who has crawled in through a window and gotten into and he's watching film, and he didn't even have to be there. He was just there because he had driven up from Boston, I guess, and said, I wasn't going to go get a hotel. So he just went there and watched film. Later that day, we're testing the rookies. This is a true story. We're testing the rookies, and we're doing the short shuttle. So he had been over playing basketball, and he saw us doing it. And he said, so what's the best time so far? And I said, well, 4.1, which is a good short shuttle time. So he says, well, let me see what I can do. And he jumps in there and did a 3.75. And it was ridiculous. Nobody, he was at the end of his CFL career. So he was just a special guy. And so he bought a ping pong table for the team for the team locker. We were in the trailers, and so players and they try to make it as good as they can. he had bought a ping pong table, and I said, Doug, that's awesome. You bought a ping pong table for these guys. And he said, the only reason I bought it is because they all talk so much shit, and I needed to show them that they can't hang with me. And he went and he kicked everybody's ass in ping pong. That was why he bought the table. So he was just a different breed that I'm blessed that I got an opportunity to be with him and learn from him. And like I said, it just humbled me to that year I got to be with Doug Flutie. But no, there's been so many. I mean, I can't, it's so hard. I had Anthony Calvillo in 2002, and everybody thinks of Mark Trestman, but Anthony's first year as an MVP, Don had just got the job in Montreal. I was in the XFL, and we had just won the XFL championship, which because of COVID, I still am one of only 50 championship rings that I have in the XFL because they didn't have a championship, not enough games. So I was the only person happy to see that thing end after 5 games because now my ring has a little more value.
Oh man. Who was your quarterback at the time with that XFL team?
We had Tommy Maddox, and then our backup was Scott Milanovich.
Oh, really?
Scott Milanovich.
Scott Milanovich was our backup quarterback. Tommy was our starter, and they were 2 guys who had over 5 years of NFL experience. And actually, here's another great story. My first night ever meeting with the team in LA, we were in LA, and we had like 3 days of a mini camp, and I'm teaching the offense to the offense, and it's 10:30 at night. And most of these guys could come from back east, so they were tired. So everything's left. Tommy and Scott were together. They said, hey, you got a couple minutes? We ended up sitting in that classroom till 4 a.m. talking about nothing but protection. They wanted to make sure that they weren't going to get their asses kicked behind whatever system I had. And it's one of the reasons that Scott, he came up and worked for me, played for me in Calgary, another great story. And then ended up coaching. And again, in 2000 or 2011, when I stepped down, it was so I could bring Scott in as the head coach. And a lot of it goes back to that first ever meeting, because I know he understands protection and things like that. So yeah, it was Tommy Maddox and Scott. And then I went the next year when they folded the league. I thought I was going to be a head coach in that league. Because we had won the championship and I was the offensive coordinator, I got a call at the beginning of, it was in May, they were in the league meetings in New York. And I got a call saying, hey, it's possible you're going to be the new head coach of the Philadelphia franchise. They were going to expand. So I said, wow, that'd be awesome. It was the end of the week, Thursday, and Al Luganbill, who was our head coach, he actually called me and he says, are you sitting down? And I thought he was going to say, hey man, you're the new head coach in Philadelphia. And he says, there's no more league. They're dropping the entire league. I said, well, what, for a year? Or, no, forever. It's over. And it was like, oh my goodness gracious. And again, that started a whole nother deal with this, it was just, it was a nightmare. So Don had got the job in Montreal, asked me to come as his offensive coordinator because we had won together in 97, asked me to come as offensive coordinator to Montreal. We had Anthony Calvillo, who hadn't even taken snaps from gun in the years he was in Las Vegas and things like that. Because back then the shotgun was not a huge deal. And so we spent our off season working in the shotgun and doing those things and put together an offense that, we thought Anthony could be, and he was. Ben Cahoon, we moved from, again, Don Matthews moved him from, he was the widest receiver, the Z, moved into a boundary slot. Nobody could cover him. And he took pinball in Montreal. He had taken pinball in Toronto, moved him into the slot. So he was the first guy to do that with a running back. we did the same thing in Montreal with Thomas Haskins. We had Mike Pringle. We took Thomas Haskins, put him in the slot like we had done with pinball, and he had an incredible year. So it was interesting to, but then you go into, from 2005 when Ferzani gave me that roll of money and I became a GM, it's like everybody forgot I can coach. It's like, you become this other thing. And so anyway, it's been a great ride, and we'll see. I love the CFL. I always have. I always will. All I want is the very best for this league, and like I say, and it's because of people like Charleston, and to pick out players is so hard. I mean, I had a young guy. I was hired in Hamilton to be a consultant because they don't have a GM, and so Orlando does some of it, and Sean Burke does some administrative, and he does some things, and then Drew Allen. They're kind of a conglomerate. So I came in as kind of a consultant for that. But then June Jones leaves and goes to the XFL, and now Tommy Condell becomes a coordinator, and they're coach short. So I stepped in and coached for the first time since I hadn't been a position coach, not a coordinator, since 1996, my first year in the league.
Wow.
When I was an offensive line coach, which I had been in Saskatchewan as a guest coach, I'd been an offensive line coach, but even though I was a quarterback coach and things in the States before, but that's how I got into the league. Anyway, so I got a chance to coach a young guy named Nikola Kalinic, and I was basically I helped Tommy with coordinating the offense, and I'd help him with things like that. But I coached one guy because they had we had a line coach, we had a running back coach and a receiver coach. And so they wanted me to coach Nikola, and he was it was just a treat. And that guy's going to he's going to continue to grow and be a great player in this league. So to pinpoint one guy who I love more than another is so difficult, because the number of dinks I've met in this league, I can count on one hand. The number of guys who are just even Lawrence Phillips, who, even that was, I wouldn't count him as a dink. He was just messed up. And Charleston played with him. Didn't you play with him?
Yeah.
No, you didn't. Did you?
Lawrence Phillips?
Yeah.
I think when I came in, he was leaving though. He was on his way out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it was wild.
So with that, Jim, I want to know, you've got some great stories about the XFL and CFL, and Charleston and I were just talking about that. We've had many previous guests, talk about the CFL and not being able to play this year. Do you think that gives the XFL then a window of opportunity to be able to grow its brand? Because I think the XFL is going to be different. You can tell me from your past experience with the XFL from previous with Jim McMahon, now going to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson owning it and his partner Danny Garcia. How is the XFL going to be different? And is it going to be a threat to the CFL?
Okay, two things. Number one, you have two different types of two entities. Yeah. The XFL it's American football, which isn't Canadian football. We play the greatest 3-down football in the world here. Okay. Now, it's a different game than the American game.
Yep.
There are a ton of guys in the NFL that come up here and they can't play because of the style of play. It's a spatial game. You have to have athleticism and movement. You have to be able to. Charleston went from being an inside linebacker in the American game and I think people lose sight of that. Okay. We're not in competition with the XFL. They're a completely different entity than what we are. The new XFL, again, it's hard to tell. They bought that for $15 million. Now, I've been involved with some startup type leagues that are trying to do this thing. Whether they understand, they have to create some revenue streams. They can be on TV, they can do all those things, but they're not making great money. It's not like the NFL where they're making great money from those things. Yeah. Can they get people to go watch the quarterbacks that they had playing in the XFL? Because that's what, the quality of play has to be there. It was difficult for us in the XFL. We had some really good players because it was Vince McMahon. Jim McMahon was the quarterback of the Bears. Vince McMahon was
thank you.
the ref.
There you go. Yeah, that's what I was thought I have to be able to do that. Vince and Jim, and I was a big Bears fan back then, so I was thinking Jim, but good thing you got that. Yeah.
But he lost about 120 million. Now, the cost of running a professional football league it's exorbitant. I mean, it really is. It's a lot. And you know, back in when I first came in this league, the difference between the NFL and the NFL and the CFL in terms, I mean, back in the early 90s, 92, 93,
yep,
the CFL was beating the NFL on players. It wasn't until the middle to late 90s that the NFL started to take foot and get into gambling and the things like that, the fantasy, all those things started to grow so to where TV became a big deal. Well, Vince McMahon stood in front of us in our first ever meeting with training camp. All the players, everybody who was in, we were in two spots. Half of the teams were in Las Vegas and half of the teams were in Florida. And he stood in front of our Las Vegas group, the Western teams, and he said, it doesn't matter if one person comes to a game, this is going to be here for 3 years. We had people who moved across the country based on what he said. They moved their families. They moved from Florida to California. And then to drop it after a year. And, you know, I mean, here, this is another kind of interesting story is they were going to stop paying us at the end of, they told us in May and they were going to stop paying us in June. Well, we had assistant coaches that had moved all the way across the country. You leave coaches unemployed in May and June, they're not finding jobs. There's no jobs out there.
Yeah.
So I actually had a young guy who had played for me at Occidental College in that first year when I was there, and he's a labor lawyer in New York, a big labor lawyer, and so we basically put a barrage on the NFL, on the XFL, on Vince McMahon, that the coaches needed to be paid for one more year. And they relented and gave us all full benefits and pay for 1 year so that we could actually get things in order. So it's been, you know, like I say, it's been an interesting career for me. And I was actually, prior to the XFL, after my key didn't work in Toronto, I was trying to get a buyout so that I could, because I knew I was going to go to the XFL. So it was, I don't know, just everything that happens, it always happens for the best. Like right now, you look at COVID and it crushed, we had 15 wins in Hamilton, and you have a lot of momentum going, and now you end with that crushing Grey Cup game where we basically physically got blasted. We had beat them twice, and we came in and like I say, physically they blasted. And now you have to wait 2 years before you can play again. Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of changes. The CFL can't function the way it was. It just can't. And I think that's what's going on right now. You're going to see changes everywhere. Personally, I kind of anticipated, so I started a business back in January, and because I see the CFL undergoing some major changes, and it's not necessarily for the bad, it's for what has to happen, and the ownership groups in the CFL will figure it out. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of casualties along the way, and I'm trying to stay ahead of the curve. And
with that, do you think the CFL dropped the ball, not being able to form a season last year, or do what other organizations?
Absolutely not. I honestly, I think they did the right, and I think that Denver game, the other day when they're playing that guy who's not a quarterback, those sponsors paid a lot of money for those spots. I watched the first series to see if they came out in the double wing or the single wing or did something creative to not put that kid into an NFL style offense that he's got to read when he's never, and they didn't, they just let him get smeared. And it was bad football. Anybody who kept that on for 4 quarters, well, those sponsors lose. I think that the whole idea of the bubble and all those kinds of things were great in theory, but it would just take one team to have, you look at the NCAA, what's going on with that? You got games canceled right and left and center. And, in the CFL, you're dealing with grown men who have families and things like it. Just, I thought that now in terms of the whole way they handled, I don't know enough about that stuff. I felt bad for the players. I felt bad for everybody involved. Everybody took, it was bad. Everybody in the league took cuts, and most people, I think there's some teams that didn't, but for the most part. So it was a difficult year, but I don't regret them not trying to play, because I'm looking at the NFL is not out of the woods yet. Yeah. And with things, I'm actually down in Chicago because I'm still trying to keep my business going. So I've got clients all over down here. And so I'm in Chicago today. I just flew from Las Vegas, where everything is just kind of, it's in limbo right now because of this. And that Denver thing, like I say, to me, that spoke volumes as to why it was a good thing that the CFL didn't put themselves into that kind of position. It's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't things.
Yeah. So tell us about what's going on now. What are you doing with this new business? Tell us a little bit about it.
I'm a personal quarterback coach. So I've got clients across the country. I've got a couple in Charlotte, North Carolina. I got some in, I have a guy here in Chicago. I have one in Hawaii. I have 2 in California. I have 1 in Pittsburgh. And I basically, I've been doing it all. I mean, things I didn't know, like this whole Zoom thing's new to me. And
You're doing
the company I work with, Skulu, they basically, they provide a platform. So I've been doing it online. I have clients I meet with twice a week, and they go out and throw, and they put it on their phone, then send it to me. Then I analyze with them, and I'll put video of them and Tom Brady. I have every NFL quarterback broken down, so I can compare them to them. And so I try to teach them at a different level than what they get. I have quarterbacks going to try to get in the CFL. I teach the CFL game too. So I take them, I teach them from I think Joe Burrow, you watch Joe Burrow as a quarterback. What makes him great, I believe, and maybe in a different class from other quarterbacks that have come, he's learned the game from a defensive perspective. His dad was a defensive coordinator his whole life. So when Joe was sitting in the living room, he went to his dad's work with him and watched him breaking film down, he always saw it from a defensive perspective. So I take my guys, and I believe the same way. I believe the game is between the defensive coordinator and the quarterback. Not the offensive coordinator, but the defensive coordinator and all the defensive coordinator has to do is fool the quarterback. Yeah. So I want them to understand the problems with third man coverage, what happens to run support, things like that. So they learn the game at a completely different level from me. I also believe that when you look at quarterbacks, it's happening throughout the NFL. A guy like Blake Bortles, who's 3rd guy taken overall, and now he's out of the league. A guy like Marcus Mariota's on his way. They all have insecurities. They all have things they need help with. That a quarterback coach for a team, it's difficult for them because they're looking at the short-term process. Can they win now? They have to win now to have their job next week. Yeah. That's the nature of pro football. And if you don't think so, ask Greg Williams, who was a defensive coordinator last week and has no job this week.
We were just talking about
talking about that.
Yeah, it's true. It's like it's week to week. Yeah. So if some young quarterback coach who's been designated quarterback coach, he can't say to somebody, hey, if on your separation, if you just bring the ball back a little quicker, if that might help, just try it. Just take a look. Or this is how you're reading this. well, what if you did this with your eyes because you're getting there too early? You just give a different perspective to them. Because basically my concern is that quarterback's development. So I'm not trying to undermine any coaches, but my concern is his development. The coach's concern is always keeping your job, which is win the next game. Yes. So that's kind of what I'm doing. Nobody's ever done it. But it's been a blast. The Skulu group I'm with has done a great job of finding me the right kind of clients. And I've got guys. My youngest is a grade 9, but he's one of the top players in the US. And I have them all the way up through guys who are trying to get into the CFL and they're graduated from college. And I'm teaching them the CFL game so that they can go to training camp and compete at a high level, because you get 2 weeks. And as a quarterback, that's difficult. So that's kind of what I'm doing, and it's a blast. It's really been
that's
something
crazy
that's
how
fun.
everything kind of evolved over time to that, because that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I kind of started my own little football camp academy right now for like front 7 guys, like linebackers / defensive linemen, and we take them through all these personal drills and training and stuff. And then like once a week, we'll watch film with them and try to break down the mental aspect of the game, of where your eyes should be, what you should look for, how you manipulate an offensive lineman into doing what you want them to do, getting his hips open, trying to pass rush the right way, teaching them where the hands should be on run, like that whole aspect of film watching. And you could tell all the kids are like absorbing it like crazy. Like I've never looked at football this way, where looking at an offensive lineman and if he's where his eyes are can tell you where the play is going or how his body language is. And yeah, I'm trying to install the same thing what I've learned over the years of 13 years of pro football to other people, and try to figure out how can I teach this, what I've kind of developed to work for myself, to other people. And it's been working out like crazy, especially for my kids at least.
Yeah, and that's really good for football across on both sides of the border. But it's gotten to a point that coaches are about, hopefully not at the youth level, but are about one thing, and that's keeping your job. Mm-hmm. And I was in that world. I've been in that world my whole life, where you win. In fact, the year I did TSN, one of the things that drew me back was not having that buzz of, if we lose, we could get fired. There is an adrenaline with having your job on the line every week. That is, it's like it is a drug. And the year I did TSN, which I love doing, and again, it's one of those things that maybe I wasn't ready then. I needed to go back and do, like I said, I got a chance that the Tiger Cats gave me a great opportunity to do those things again. But we change, and I just think I love what you're doing with youngsters, and teaching kids how to play the game at another level makes it more fun for them, and it gives them advantages in a world that it's hard to gain advantages. And so I applaud you for what you're doing, Charleston.
Good for both of you guys on that. I love that aspect, and be able to take it to the next level for these kids and doing it for the younger generations. Jim, our kind of last words, wanted to ask you, what advice do you have for Mr. Hughes, who's, like he said, now 37 years? He is soon to be, in 6 days, 37 years. He's going to be a free agent here, or he is a free agent basically. And what would be your advice for Mr. Hughes coming up for his maybe possibly last few years? You never know with him and his work ethic and what he does. But what's your words for Charleston to kind of finish up his playing career, or what advice would you have for him?
My advice to Charleston would be, don't ever think of it the way that Johan just talked about in terms of the end. Is approach it like you're 23 years old, and now you've got a lot more knowledge, but you know, Charleston's one of those rare individuals that has a body type that allows him to play forever and play as long as he can, because I know how much he loves it. And you plan like what he's doing. You find what you love doing and plan for the future. But if you, as soon as you start approaching it as this might be my last year, I might only have 2 more, you have 1 more year or 2 more years. If you approach it as Tom Brady is, I'm gonna play till I'm 50, or it doesn't, you know, who knows?
Yeah.
Who says you can't? It's, are you better than that young kid that comes in that you have all the knowledge for? So if Charleston was my son, I would say, you act like you're 23 years old and you are fighting your ass off for your job every day, and understand that, and play as long as you can, and then you'll never have a regret.
That's awesome. That's some fantastic words. There you go, Charleston. Act like you're 23. I like that. I like that. Charleston, do you have anything else you want to chat about with Jim?
I don't know, man. I think that's it. I learned more about Jim Barker than I've ever known. No, that was amazing, man. Good luck in all your, your future endeavors, especially with Schooly is what it's called.
Schooloo. Schoolu. Schooloo.
Well,
okay.
We'll make sure we'll tag that, and we'll tag you on all of our social media links to be able to do that.
You know what? To be honest with you, that's why I have Schooloo, because I don't know a thing about social media. I can't be tagged because I don't have any of it.
Okay.
And I know I should do Twitter. And I mean, Donald Trump can do Twitter. Why can't Jim Barker? I just can't do it. I can't do Twitter. I don't do Instagram. My grandkids all do it. I don't do any of it. I'm just afraid about what's gonna, I say something and I'm an emotional, passionate guy. You say something and then it's there forever. And I don't know, it just scares me.
Well, Jim, we really appreciate you taking the time to be able to join us. I know that for me,
that was a blast.
As a fan, and not only as an Argo fan, but just as a fan of CFL and your stories, I feel like we could just keep on listening to you for hours and hours and hours, and just about the players. But it was an absolute blast to have you. Thank you. Good luck with all your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Stay safe, stay healthy. We always end the show with Charleston's words of wisdom. So I'll let Charleston close it up.
I hope you're ready for this.
I am.
The great Jim Barker. That is amazing, though, how you've been coaching after all these years, especially starting at a young age and just keep developing throughout your entire, sports career, as far as being a GM, being a coach, head coach, position coach. I've always known you as a GM Barker, so I didn't even know you used to coach. I was asking Johan that last night, like, I don't even know if he ever played sports. Like, the only thing I know him for is just being a GM throughout the entire league. But, that's
here's one more piece, Charleston, with that. I was a college head baseball coach for 8 years.
Yes, that's right. We forgot. We didn't even talk about that, and that's one of my passions is the Yankees and baseball. That's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, so there you go.
Good.
See, look, and then he just find a way to piece it all together and figure it out. Which is absolutely amazing, man. But this is called the Better with Age podcast. The reason we call this the Better with Age podcast, but not only like myself that gets better with age, you've got better with age your entire career, and the more people that you surrounded yourself around, you just kept getting better and better, man. And that's kudos to you. But the reason we call this the Better with Age webcast is because there's many things that get better with age, whether it's wine, whether it's whiskey, whether it's leather, whether it's your beautiful face. But the most important thing of it all is friendships. And I know you've been one of my good friends / coaches, throughout my entire career. I'm glad to be able to have you on the show. And this was the Better with Age podcast.
Thanks, Jim, for everything. Good luck to you.
All right. Thank you, guys.